Hi, welcome. I have the most amazing job in the world. So I get to travel to different parts, to different countries and work with very, very senior executives on transformation. If I ask my kids what I do for a job, the answer is normally something like the emperor's new clothes. I get to walk into very large organisations and say the emperor's naked. Because actually that's what transformation is. It's about having introspectiveness about yourself. It's an emotional thing. So what gets in the way of transformation is the inability for companies to actually be truthful and humanistic and transparent about how they make decisions, and therefore they get in the way of themselves. And so what I want to talk about today is a little bit about how you can avoid that, and I will leverage very heavily on a couple of organisations that I've worked with more recently. So a lot of financial services companies that are going through this, so I've spent a lot of time in financial services organisations. The last two, one was in Boston. It's about a £1.5 trillion organisation. Just trying to translate on the fly. So an enormous organisation who are number 1 and 2 in all markets in which they operate in wealth management, became very stagnant. For 3 years on their Horizon 3 were planning for robo-advisors, and then in 2014 their number 1 competitor went live to market with robo-advisors, and I got a phone call. The other organisation is an organisation that spends about $5 billion a year on stuff, £5 billion a year on stuff, I'd already translated that, but actually don't know where it's being spent. So they can't tell me. In fact, we spent 12 weeks trying to visualise their expenditure across the organisation, and at the end of that 12 weeks we still had no agreement that it was true. And when we visualised it, it got taken down because it created such conflict in the business to actually put it up like that so they could have a conversation about it. Nobody wanted to talk about it. So I want to leverage some of that. In order to do that though, I need you to suspend belief, because some of this stuff you sit there and go, it really couldn't happen, or it'll never work for us. And so I like to put this up to begin with, because it sort of freaks me out a little bit that in 1912 we treated the children's cold with heroin. No one back in those days was saying that heroin will never work. In 1930, skincare for women, the number 1 skincare product was radium. And even in the 1950s, the number 1 advertiser, the number 1 profession used to advertise cigarette smoking was doctors. And these are factual. So I just ask for 30 minutes that we just kind of suspend what we think may or may not be possible in your organisation, and come on a journey with me. What I know to be absolutely true, the battleground right now is about speed. And so 90% of the work that I'm doing is to help organisations increase pace. Increase pace of decision making, increase pace of feedback loops, so that they can pivot, make faster decisions, increase the pace in which they can get value to the customers. And in fact, when we talk about measures, the only thing that actually matters is how much volume, can you get to your customer faster, frequency. These are the killer challenges. And so when we think about those kind of things, it looks a little bit like this. We've got new entrants who are coming into markets who can get to market really, really quickly, but they just can't scale. Then we've got traditional organisations who cannot get to market very, very quickly, but have all the scale in the world. This is the battleground. So what gets in the way of these traditional firms? And obviously most of my work is traditional organisations. So I'm working with banks, governments, telcos. So these organisations aren't built to operate at speed. They're built either for efficiency or for scale. They're not built for speed. So we have policies that get in the way. Now, I'm not saying for a second that we should break policy, but we have to question policy, because the policies of 5 years ago don't work today. They get in the way. We've got things like making numbers, taking precedence. There's a mass confusion about measures in organisations today. Mass confusion. So there are 3 types of measures. There is the measures of performance of the business, largely financial. They are critical, they are important, but they are too late to be able to make decisions in what you do in the next week. There are measures of performance on people. That's a whole topic on itself. But the most important measure is the measures that we have that tell us what work we need to do. How do we know how to generate value for customers? And how do we know if the work that we are doing is generating value for customers? The other big thing that's happening in the market is this amazing gap and the speed of technology hitting the market, the speed of technology choice, the speed of emergent technologies, and the ability of traditional organisations to adopt those technologies. And it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so again, when we talk about speed, it's being able to create an environment where you can adopt new technologies or trial new technologies quickly, work out which ones will give you a competitive advantage, and then scale them out. So 3 things I want to focus on. So the first thing we want to talk about is how we align everything that you do to delivering outcomes. Second thing is how you, actually the second thing for me is really down this end, how you then use technology to do that. But this piece in the middle is how you remove the constraints that stop those 2 things coming together. So I'll tell you a story about this bank that I was working with. They'd just gone through a restructure. I was there about 3 weeks afterwards. And the question I asked the CIO is, why did you restructure like that? Why did you make this decision? And he said, well, because I was talking to the business and they're my customers. And so they gave me feedback and so we arranged it. I said, okay, that's fair enough. So what are you measuring to know whether it's made things better or worse? How would you know? And he goes, oh, yeah, you're right, I can't. So can you just tell me the one thing I should do next? I said, yeah, that's really simple. Find out what customers want. What do customers value from you? He goes, oh, we've just done that. We've just paid the money, we've had the research done, and we found out that 70% of our customers want a mortgage. And I said to him, I don't know anyone who wants a mortgage. And so at that moment, the epiphany hits. Actually, 70% of their customers want a home. That feels better, doesn't it? Even just saying it feels better. But if you take that to the extreme and get quite pragmatic about it, for the organisations that are focusing on mortgages, largely they'd pull together product teams. They'd do some creative stuff. They'd have to do something digital because everyone does. So they'd probably do a digital mortgage advisor. And they'd do some product bundling, some interest rate stuff. And they'd build something and have features. And they'd release MVPs of features. Now, flip. The company that's focusing on putting people into a home. What's an increment of that? Because that's what they're focusing on. So they're thinking more about what does it take for our customers to get a home? How do we help them find out where they can live? How much they can afford? How do we help it make it easy for them to get through all of the processes of government to actually get their home? How do we simplify the process? Think about those 2 streams from the point of view of what people would be working together. What skills would you bring to bear on one versus the other? It's a completely different set of skills. It's a completely different group of people working together, and you would measure something completely different, and your staff would go home thinking about how many people they put into a home. That's the world you're about to compete against. That's the world traditional firms are up against. I love some of the stuff John was talking about because we'll go into org structure type stuff later on, but think about that from an org structure point of view. The one on the first one I spoke about is very aligned to functional org structures. And the one on the left busts it completely. Next, it's pretty simple. Line up everything that you do to the completion of outcomes. Sounds easy. It's not. In fact, when I go into organisations, we normally spend the first kind of 4 months building visualisation of the current organisation to show them how the outcomes they're trying to achieve as a business and the work they're doing every day align or not. And you bring to bear the things that they're actually measuring. They're completion measures. They're never, are we achieving the outcome? The greatest measure you need in an organisation. Are we or are we not achieving the outcome? So aligning everything to that, making business decisions really, really obvious, and capturing weaker signals. This is such a critical part of transformation because it depersonalises the work. We stop talking about people and teams, and we start making decisions based on what's actually happening in the organisation and changing the measures. For this, the single most important simplified graph in the world, which is knowing, can we make cost linear so you fund capacity, not projects? Projects should not exist. Get rid of projects. We fund capacity, not projects, and then we simply measure value along the way. And then if we get to a situation where I've delivered 90% of the value for 70% of the cost, I can have a really good conversation about whether we should stop. Should we take the 30% that's left that would only give us another 10% of value and do something else? Sometimes no, sometimes you should keep going, but never keep going past here. It's a simple graph. I reckon 5% of businesses in the world today could actually draw it. One of the main reasons is that we confuse value and benefits. Value is what customers get from you. Benefits is what you receive in return. So if you are calling profit or revenue or sales units value, you'll never get this. So this is about saying, release something, release something, release something, release something. Was it valuable to the customer? Yes or no? Was it valuable to the customer? Yes or no? Should we keep going? So that's the kind of pace we're talking about. And things that I teach executives is actually how to read these, because if the line's going down here, probably it's not getting the value that you expected from it. We should do something different. If the line starts to grow exponentially, throw everything that you have at it. Give it the money that it's asking for. And again, this is how we change finance. So the finance doesn't have to be annually planned. We actually just spend the money on the things that are achieving value. It's quite simple. We don't have to worry about cross-company prioritisation and adversarial decisions being made every 12 months about what the budget's going to be, because we just keep spending money on the things that are adding value. It's really easy. It's obvious. So trying to achieve this kind of graph in your organisation, that's where you've got to set your sights, being able to do that. Then we start to think about how we remove the constraints. So it's a really simple business, right? If leaders do what they need to do, which is set direction, orders with minimum constraints. Tell us where we need to go, then get out of the way and let the talents of the people that you've hired come to bear. Right? It's a really important side note on that, which is the talents of the people that you've hired does not equal the job that you've given them. It does not equal the application they gave for the role. Right? What they did there is they answered what they thought you would like to hear so that you would hire them. What we're talking about here is unlocking the natural talents of people. So basically we have the outcomes that the leaders set. This is where we want to go. I then need you to tell me the measure that tells me whether or not I've achieved that outcome. Once I've got that measure, the measure decides the work. So we design work to move the needle of an outcome. It's almost cheating. So everything that you do is designed to move the needle. And of course, if you have money, you throw it at things that move the needle the most. And if the needle isn't moving, you stop spending on it. Once you have that, the next most important thing happens is you then design your functional businesses to improve the delivery of the outcome. That's how you set up your org structure. That's how you set up your funding models. That's how you set up your infrastructure and your architecture, designed to improve the moving of the needle on the outcome. And it's really important when you think about work that you can be introspective, because not all work is equal. And the number one thing you have to be introspective about in an organisation is the honesty of whether or not you actually know. So, if I actually know that for every dollar I put in, $5 will come out, and I can prove it, and I've got a data source and I can point to that shows us that's going to happen, give them the money. Therefore, don't bother doing a business case. What's the point? They can prove it. No need for it. If I know nothing, if it's a good idea, I think it will happen, but I'm not sure, give them a little bit of money to go and find out. Therefore, don't make them write a business case. It's useless. They don't know anything. They'd be lying to you. Notice the thread? We don't need business cases. In the middle is the difficulty. This is the new muscle that companies need to learn, which is, how do I exploit opportunity? How do I take the things that we've explored that have shown potential? And when we explore, fixed time frame, small amount of money, small amount of people. Just so you know, that's how we do that. The things that work, hypothesis. So all I'm measuring here is a hypothesis. I'm not measuring revenue or customer acquisition or anything like that. It's just, did it or did it not? Those that work, we then have to work out, can we do it? Is it feasible? Just because it shows potential, does it work at scale? Can I replicate the same response at scale? So here I'm measuring growth. I'm still not measuring revenue. I'm still not measuring, right, the growth measures. Only here and only with this type of work can I measure revenue. I promise you, most of your organisation is doing this to everything. This is how we work for everything. It's all pre-planned, it's all pre-decided, it's largely based on a fictitious business case. We never really go back and check anyway, so it doesn't matter. By the time we want to find out whether it did what we thought it was going to do, the people have all disbanded and they're doing something else, so there's no one really to talk to. All right? So understanding the type of work and what you measure is different. It's really, really critical. If anyone's interested, it's about 65% of your work, 15% of your work, 25% of your work. That's kind of the split that you'd expect to see in the business as to how you do that. And then lastly, thinking about how you leverage all the massive change that's going on in technology right now. And you've heard about it, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. You've heard about it with the other talks today. If you think about it from our perspective, tech at the core is everything. What is going on right now is that there is no longer IT and business. And we have to get rid of that, because working in transformations every day, I see the enormous pain going on when I walk into a company and IT are doing a transformation and the business is doing a transformation, and they're completely different. Spotify has a lot to answer for. Basically, you walk into a company, you'll see the business doing a Spotify model and you'll see IT doing IT as a service. The two things are diametrically opposed. You cannot do both. IT as a service says IT is fat and we treat the customer is the business. I've never heard something so ludicrous in all my life. The customer is the business. And all that does is it makes IT have to focus on dollars. Because their customer has the dollars and it's the business. So they've got to find a way to be efficient, and they'll do horizontal scaling of everything in order to try and meet everybody's needs at once. And we are trading off the value we deliver to customers. We're trading off agility. So we're forcing that. Spotify model, don't mind it. Business and IT working together, so IT is thin. What it means, though, is that every tribe has their own architecture. And they have ownership of the entire architecture, and they have the dollars for all of it. For those of you in IT, it actually means the dollars available to spend goes up rather than down by 5% year on year. It goes up because you're responsible for the entire thing, and it makes the business have to understand the hidden illities of technology. Right? They've got to understand, they've got to pay for testing. All these things that they don't think about because it's all in IT. $1 now covers all of that, so it's really important. This is what we mean when we say tech at the core. It is that technology and business starts to merge. To run your business, you're using technology. The products are technology products. So understanding that that's going on is really, really critical. Talk for another time, but there are seismic shifts that we are talking about right now that you really need to be starting to deal with, right? Talk for another time. And there is this leadership change that has to happen. We talked before about orders with minimum constraints. It's really important to understand the nature of humanistic leadership. And by humanistic, what I'm talking about there is, and it's a passion of mine, so it's where staff and the customer are number one. All decisions are made based on that. The leap of faith assumption is, if I focus on them, profit will take care of itself. And it's hard to make that leap of faith assumption. It's really hard, really difficult. But as a reference point, so there's about 60 organisations that I study. I get to kind of go around the world and talk to different companies. Those 60 organisations who practice humanistic methods, so these organisations like Southwest Airlines is one of those, they're outperforming the S&P 500 by 300% in profit. That's enormous. So when we talk about profitability, we're talking about exponential profitability by focusing not on profit, not that it's not important, but by focusing on the people and the humanistic side of those things. So, the biggest thing you've got to deal with, you must deal with ambiguity. There are two axes that we deal with when we do transformational change. One is stability, and the other one is certainty. So we have certainty and ambiguity running this way, and we have stability and instability running this way. If in your organisation you have certainty and stability, you will soon die. That is inertia. If you have stability and ambiguity, that's cool. Because you are creating a safety for people to go after stuff. We don't have to know what, we need to know the outcome. We don't need to know anything in between. So we're giving them the stability, we're giving them the freedom to go after stuff, use their talents. Of course, if you have instability and ambiguity, you've got chaos, so we don't really want that sort of stuff. But understanding that how to deal with ambiguity as a leader is really hard. It's really difficult. In all these organisations I'm working with, it's the toughest thing. So the organisation I've been working with in Boston, they're dealing in wealth management. One of the executives had a great idea, which was that they wanted to create an online notes environment for high investors to take notes about trades that they wanted to make. And the concept was to get rid of the bookcase behind them full of notes and filing cabinets and things. And so the team did this brilliant MVP. The MVP was to test whether or not anyone would use it. And a week before they went to put it out into the test environment, the executive came in and said it wasn't pretty enough. It made them work for another 6 weeks. And no one used it. So it's really hard to work in this environment. The same organisation were measuring that executive on trades. And it was really interesting. We found out quite early that the way a customer flows through this organisation is that trades go very high, then we go and put kids in college, then we start to retire. And very quickly we could see a massive loss of customer base in between those two periods of time because no one paid attention to them because the manager of those areas is only paid on trade volume. So they're missing the customer piece. So these elements of being a leadership, it's really difficult. These are new skills that leaders don't necessarily have. So we have to be very conscious about it. So, what have we got? 6 minutes. That's not bad. 6 minutes. So there are some really important things that will absolutely get in your way. And this came because when I was engaged in this organisation in Boston, it was Fidelity. So when I was engaged at Fidelity, I was engaged by the CFO, right? Which was great because I was able to get rid of business cases in the first 7 months. We redesigned the entire funding model like that. It was really cool. We changed the prioritisation process from 6 months of adversarial nature to 4 hours over beers. It was great. But when we think about things that were getting in the way, we had one of the key executives, she was Irish-Italian, nothing wrong with that, but wow. And so one night she sat there, she was in tears, and she was quite aggressive towards me, and she said, "Gary, just tell us what the next 5 brick walls are that we're going to run into, because this is really hurting." And it does really, really hurt. And so I went back to my hotel room and thought maybe I could answer that question. So this is the answers I come up with. First thing is losing sight of the customer. So when you start to get into transformations and change like this, it's very, very quickly, it's very easy to start focusing on yourselves and the change that you're making, rather than understanding that what you're doing it for is to deliver more value to the customer more often. So step one, make sure every change that you make is measured by the impact it has in the value delivery to customers. So that's what you're measuring. Did I not increase the value or the frequency? Number two, worst one ever, fixation on roles. What does this mean for me? What about my job? What I typically see this end up being is executives who make decisions so that their role stays intact on the transformation. So we compromise what is right so that everyone still keeps their empire. It's really tough. In fact, in the last one I did, we had the project management function of 140 people come and present to the executive group for 80 minutes on their role in the future transformed state, what they would do for the company. And this brilliant CEO, she turned around at the end of it and she said, that was a really good presentation, but slide one didn't say, do we need to exist? It was really interesting. So everyone starts to fight. So you've got to create a safety where people's talents are more important than the role you've given them. Otherwise, they will fear that their role will go away. It's really important. That'll create paralysis. Overbalancing on exceptions, my favourite one. Everybody has to change except for infrastructure. So this happens everywhere. He who yells the loudest gets an exemption. Everyone else is forming tribes and squads, but not that group, because they can't possibly work that way. Well, yes, they can. So don't overbalance. Don't let anyone out. It is far better to go end-to-end, thin slice through the organisation and do that well, learn from it, work out what's going to stop you, take the next thin slice end-to-end through the organisation, make sure you get the same result, and then scale out what works. Do not do broad transformation. Okay? That's the realm of other consultancy firms that make lots of money off you from doing that. Feeding the machine. When I did this one, I didn't realise that there was a lot of Australian vernacular that the rest of the world really doesn't get. So I've got to be really careful how I explain all this sort of stuff. But basically what we're saying here is you can't sit there and go, we're going to create a flat structure where we're going to organise ourselves around outcomes, but you'll report to him and maybe you'll report to him. So you can't then go back and start to play around with traditional thinking, because all that will do is convince people that you're not really changing. Right? So we see a lot of organisations talk the talk, but when it comes down to the tic-tacs, nothing changes. So you've got to be really, really careful. Right? We're going to change the funding model, but if you can just let us know how much you've actually spent. So you've got to really be careful about saying the right words and then actually following it up. Getting stuck in transition is really difficult. Does everyone understand tech debt? We all understand the concept of tech debt, right? It's where you make a conscious decision to make a poor technology decision because you'll go back and fix it later. Business debt is also the same, right? Where we get stuck in the compromised position because the real truth of what we should have done was just too difficult, so we'll take that small step straight away. So imagine, and we're going for time. Okay. Imagine that you buy this beautiful block of land in country Victoria, great views, kangaroos everywhere, it's amazing. And you and your partner, you go up and you visit it every weekend, dreaming of the time you get to build your house on there. All right? Close to my heart. And after about 6 months, possibly after a nice glass of red, you decide, rather than going out there every weekend, let's just buy a caravan. We'll chuck it on there. At least we get to live there. It's a compromise. But imagine the views we're going to have, and the kangaroos come through. They're habitual creatures, so they just come back and forth all the time. 6 months later, we've kind of put down a crushed rock driveway, and there's little garden beds appearing under the windows. And 12 months later, we start extending the caravan. Stuck in transition. So be very, very careful that when you make that decision to kind of cut a corner, record it and be very conscious of what you're doing. So in finishing, transformation is about simplifying your business model. I like the analogy of coming out of one fish tank and into the other. So it's simplifying, it's doing something completely different. Simplifying your business model. Creating an organisation that is focused on maximising the flow of value to customers. Making sure you've got a delivery approach that can respond to change. An architecture that allows constant change. It allows you to release things into the market weekly to see whether or not they'll work and be able to take them out again straight away if they don't. And a servant leadership that enables great culture to thrive. Or, simply, get rid of your budgets, get rid of job titles, learn how to work small, gather people around really, really clear outcomes, and measure success as something your customers get. Or at least start heading towards that. Thanks for listening.